The voice of the flight attendant rose loudly, sufficient to be heard by everyone. "I'm going to ask you to go to the rear one final time, of the aircraft, or I'll contact security." Her tone had a biting edge to her remarks. Condescending to the core, Naomi, the calm black lady, gazed up at. "I've already informed her that I'm not relocating." She spoke in a tone that was virtually calming, yet it had an indisputable strength that she was degrading in front of everyone, although nobody anticipated what would transpire if the lady they rose up, believing they had no power, and showed her true identity as we dug further into the narrative. If you think that everyone should always be handled with dignity, click the subscribe button to see what color they are. Click now and let us know where you are. Gazing from the aircraft, gleaming underneath the sleek design, in the afternoon sun guaranteeing an opulent journey for visitors, there were no passengers in the cabin. Less than luxurious soft leather seats, accents of gold, and a sense of exclusivity. It caused everyone inside to feel as if passengers of the royal family travel with ease, their pricey bags trailing behind them as they are led over to the sleek private aircraft awaiting the tarmac. They quickly became comfortable in there. Observed some people browsing through their gadgets, that other champagne-drinking people provided by the vigilant flight attendants inside the aircraft. A gentle background tune is playing in the Naomi. Williams was one of their background members. A cool-headed lady in her late 30s wearing a fitted navy blazer. Naomi wore identical slacks and subtle grace with which she moved, peaceful assurance despite the fact that she made no attempt to raise awareness about. Naomi Williams enters the scene by herself. Cabin. Her serene demeanor attracting her steps are measured, and she pays attention. Looks around the cabin for a moment before she moves in the direction of her seat. Wasn't only another journey. Rather, it was a quest to manage her expanding empire while nobody on board was aware of her identity yet. For the time being, did she like it that way? The primary flight attendant, Lauren, stands her immaculate uniform at the entrance. Her sharp features were well trimmed. With an air of authority, she welcomes she smiles warmly at each passenger one by one. For others, she takes pride in being frigid, herself on maintaining the plane's order, even though her perception of order often relies on how individuals seem or act. Lauren's the kind tone slightly changes as she extends a warm welcome aboard to Naomi, the warmth that is conspicuously lacking. Behind Naomi, the pair was seated beside Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. In their 60s radiated the comfort of seasoned Mrs. Raymond. The traveler holds a little knitted bag, her fingers already. She twitched to get to work. Mr. Raymond has a folded newspaper with him. A look of little interest as he enjoys the sight of Lauren's grin makes them happier. "Good morning, mister, and it's great to have you here, Mrs. Raymond." Naomi looks over her shoulder once again, seeing the stark disparity in Lauren's tone. Her face stays composed throughout. Her eyes convey a knowledge of the unsaid dynamics in action as other Lauren passes through as the people relax, making sure everything is in the cabin when she examines the Raymond couple. There is a bright grin there to greet them. "I can get you whatever I can before we—" Mrs. Raymond shakes her head and removes graciously, already engrossed in her. Mr. Raymond points at his knitting coffee to show that he's content when Naomi receives her demeanor adjustments from Lauren. She looks at Naomi's luggage resting once more. Her lips are pressed nicely under the seat, into a small line without providing the same warmth or civility, just by strolling. Without saying anything, have you ever been in a circumstance in which someone's disposition changed according to looks? Tell about your experience in the comments section below. Then click the Lauren Reads subscribe button. In her, she carried herself with the early 40s. The accuracy of someone who flourished on regulate. Her immaculate uniform and her well-styled hair complemented her sharp. According to Lauren, looks were important above anything else, and decisions were made quickly, and Lauren's unrepentant eyes narrowed as she saw Naomi settling into something. Concerning Naomi didn't set well with her, nor her attire, nor her composed demeanor, confidence rather than the reality that she didn't seek care right away. As many of the travelers Lauren thought were deserving of, in Lauren's opinion, Naomi just didn't belong, so she came up to me. Her lips moved in rapid, deliberate steps. "Excuse me," as I curl into a tight grin. "Ma'am," she remarked in a kind tone, Although soaking with rudeness, I believe you're in. The Naomi looked up at her in the incorrect area. Her serene demeanor makes me think that this is my seat, she said, in a firm voice. Lauren. She smiled without faltering, although her tone. Frankly, I don't believe this part is only available to our elite guests. Close by, the other travelers started to observe the conversation with a nosy socialite. Leaning slightly when sitting to improve, see how her interest surged in a cordial, a businessman on the other side of the aisle looked somewhat scowling at. Lauren's tone. Naomi maintained her composure and her steady look. You might want to double-check, she said. Examine your passenger list prior to making presumptions. Lauren arched her eyebrows. Almost undetectable annoyance. I don't have to examine what she said carefully, I know. Who is supposed to be here and who isn't? The cabin's tension made the passengers looked at one another and whispered, silently to one another, uneasy, pretended not to notice. Why doesn't she? Murmured one traveler. If she is seated incorrectly, just move. Another shrug, perhaps in an attempt to Lauren, sneak in for a complimentary upgrade. Crossed her arms, refusing to back down. If you don't go to the rear of the aircraft. Her voice was loud enough for I'll have to call for others to hear. Security. Naomi's head cocked a little. Her serene demeanor steadfastly. Contact anyone you need to. But I'm not moving the nosy, he added. The businessman's socialite gave a gentle gasp. Lauren leaned forward, his brow wrinkled. Clearly irritated, he turned to the Grace, a junior flight attendant, stood close by. Anxiously observing, she was abruptly escorted to the Grace. Paused and looked back. Between Lauren and Naomi, she wanted to raise your voice and mention checking the passenger list, just as Naomi had proposed. But Lauren's piercing stare stopped, reluctantly put her in place. She nodded and stepped. Naomi moved, advanced a little. In her, she is still sitting calmly, and you may want to carefully consider what are you doing, she replied softly. Weighing more than Lauren. Recognized Lauren's sneer as she waved off the warning. I am well aware of what I am doing. Now stand up, she urged. What would you do if this is how someone treated you on a flight? Leave your comments in the remarks, and if you're enjoying this tale, remember to click like and so far. To see more stories like this, subscribe. Lauren's voice became more acerbic as she pointed at the rear of the aircraft. You shouldn't be here, she remarked. Once again, with a hint of the people, watched with impatience in. The tension crackling in the startled hush, the air, as if Naomi leaned back a little as she. Keep your eyes fixed on Lauren. You shouldn't create presumptions about individuals, she said. Lauren's grin softly expanded. And you shouldn't be sitting in seats you didn't purchase. The cliffhanger occurred when Naomi at last took her phone. She typed with an unwaveringly composed look. Do something fast, then put it down again. On the, you're making a mistake armrest, she remarked. Just her words lingering in the atmosphere. Lauren didn't pay attention. We'll check in? That she mumbled, making another gesture. For being the junior attendant with Grace. As she approached, her hesitancy was evident. As the scenario developed, Lauren became even more irritated when Naomi stayed sitting with serene assurance. Very different from Lauren's growing agitated attitude. Of the cabin's tension thickened with each second that went along. Calling the attention of others in the vicinity, travelers who saw the conversation with Lauren's voice was full with wonder and incredulity. Rose, loud enough to be heard by everyone. Move, I'm going to ask you one last time. To the rear of the aircraft, or I'll make a call security. There was a strong edge to what she said. Her voice was full with condescension. Naomi gazed up at Lauren, serene as ever. I've previously informed you that I won't be relocating, said simply, and her voice was nearly calming. Yet it had an indisputable strength that just made Lauren angry. Advance a lady over an inquisitive socialite with flawlessly styled hair and a sense of. She leaned toward her buddy with a sense of entitlement. She muttered loud enough for other people to hear. It sounds like she's attempting to sneak in. In search of a freebie, Lauren grabbed the remark. Her grin reappears. That's just how it seems, she said. She folded her arms and faced the other travelers as if gathering support. There is a reason why we have rules. Naomi, people just don't appreciate them. unable to reply to the taunts or the increasing whispers surrounding her. But instead she kept her eyes fixed on Lauren, calmness of silent defiance that expressed more loud than any words. Grace paused, then moved in the direction of the passenger list was cut close to the. Her fingers shook as she opened the cockpit door, looked through the names in an attempt to discover something that might be beneficial. But before she could speak, Naomi Lauren yelled, "What are you doing?" to Grace. Grace scarcely raised her voice above a whisper. "I simply wanted to be sure I had Lauren intervene to keep this under control. Her tone is crisp, so you don't have to." Grace stepped back from her face in involvement, flushing with. She bit her ripped lip out of humiliation. Between acting on her moral convictions and the worry that she would lose her position as the tension increased as a nice-looking guy sat. Leaning forward across the aisle was the businessman wearing a sharp suit and smiling at Naomi with a composed expression. "Excuse me," he replied. "Gentleness is key." "Okay." Naomi turned to face him. Softening of expression. "I'm okay, thanks," she answered in a firm voice. Although thankful for the modest gesture of goodwill before the entrepreneur could continue, Lauren interrupted her accusatory tone. "Sir, I would be grateful if you didn't support the disruption," she made, returning to Naomi and pointed at her. The businessman. "You're making a scene," he remarked, frowning from where I was seated. Calmly, "You are the one creating a commotion." Lauren's cheeks reddened with rage and she returned her focus to Naomi. "I'm tired of this," she said. "You relocate or I'll ensure that you're taken off this aircraft." Naomi looked at her without. "You can try," she whispered quietly, flinching. Lauren became quite irritated. Her voice faltered as she drew in closer. "Why don't you simply acknowledge that you're in, Naomi?" The incorrect seat and cease spending. Naomi didn't say anything throughout everyone's time. Her composure is just enhancing Lauren's rage eventually caused her to leave Naomi alone, and went on to do her other tasks. Lauren strode furiously down her shined heels, clicked softly in the aisle. She carried a tray on the carpet of glistening water, her attitude professional, yet she had a tense expression. Naomi sat silently, in her annoyance. Her emphasis was on the book, with her hands passengers engaged in quiet conversation. Everything was quiet until Lauren's subtle animosity started to emerge. Naomi had been eagerly awaiting a drink. Lauren's service to Mr. and Mrs. Raymond initially, then others in Lauren, however, did not put out any effort. In order to honor Naomi, the tray was almost. When Naomi eventually spoke, her tone was vacant. "Please pardon me, but might I please have some water?" "Please." Lauren stopped and looked at Naomi, dismissively. "I'll get to you," she responded. "When I can." As she walked by, without saying anything further, Naomi's serene eyes followed the fleeing figure of Lauren, but she stayed silent. How would you respond if you became aware? Would you intervene if this conduct continued, or remain silent? Inform us in the remarks below. Minutes that have elapsed and Naomi moved around in her chair in search of a. She stretched in a more comfortable posture. One leg angled slightly toward the aisle, motion unassuming. Lauren brought the tray back, her keen eyes capturing the little change. Rather than asking Naomi to, Lauren purposefully altered her leg by. In an instant, Lauren's foot crossed her path, hit Naomi's calf, causing the tray to tilt and the water glasses fell forward. Splattering on the floor into Naomi's lap, Lauren's voice gave a dramatic gasp. "Keep an eye on your surroundings and be alert. You have created a mess by placing your legs up." Passengers' heads twisted in surprise. Amid the chaos, Naomi glanced up. Startled yet calm, she brushed her hands together. She remarked at the wetness on her pants. "You stepped into my leg, Naomi, but quietly." She cocked her head slightly and looked calmly. "Steadfast, I have merely requested to be treated as respectfully as everyone else. And if that's too much to handle," she said, "inquire, then you could be the one who." The lingering words don't belong here. The air a silent yet effective reprimand. Anger made Lauren's cheeks flush. As she moved closer, her annoyance boiled. "Do you really believe you can speak to me like that?" she sharply snarled, and then, at a startling moment, that was impossible. To control Lauren herself, held out her hand, and Naomi was smacked across the face by the loudness. Sharply reverberated throughout the cabin, and like a shockwave through the cabin, gasps of thunder echoed through the businessman stood midway between the passengers. His expression was a mixture of shock and rage. Grace quickly put her hands to her mouth and eyes. Even the inquisitive socialite was horrified, seemed surprised by her earlier smirk. Swapped out for a distressed expression, Naomi gradually straightened the hand she was holding. Serenely on her laps, her face stayed calm and maintained a steady stare as she gazed up at Lauren. There was no sound in the cabin. Naomi can feel the stress now. Her countenance stiffened in her seat, remained the same, but her eyes had a burden that caused Lauren to pause for the "you just made the worst first time." Naomi murmured softly, "Mistake of your life." Despite being quiet, her voice sliced through the air as a "what would you do with a knife if you were in Naomi's shoes?" Please share in the comments section below. And if you're captivated by this narrative, click like, subscribe. And now Naomi checked. Lauren's voice was calm and firm. "Gathered I've been understanding with you, but your actions have gone too far," she said. Her statements were forceful and purposeful. Lauren's jaw deepened in look. Her fists clutched at her and tightened. She snapped her sides as they crossed the line. "You are the one who has been speaking up. Disturbing since you boarded this aircraft." Naomi didn't flinch or come into contact with her face or provide a reciprocal response. Instead, she gradually adjusted her stance and looked focused intently on Lauren's composed manner, maintained their integrity. "Despite such, you will regret that brazen act of violence," Naomi said quietly, her tone bearing a silent authority that seems to permeate the whole for a little while. Cabin Lauren hesitated, her self-assurance shattered by Naomi's stubborn calmness, but she bounced back fast. She scoffed loudly and muttered, "I regret it. Will you contact the cops or what?" Naomi didn't respond since she didn't have to. Her quiet was quite telling, and the change in power was felt by the passengers. From the cabin's corner, Grace, the A junior flight attendant, saw the scenario develops, a blend of terror and tenacity. She had been silently watching Lauren's actions throughout the day. Uncomfort increases with each step. She realized now that she couldn't remain. "Grace, please don't be quiet any longer." Left the chaos behind and took out her phone and punched in a number. Her fingers were shaking a little bit. Her voice was heard when the call connected. "It's Grace," she stated quietly but firmly, "and we have a predicament aboard the aircraft." Grace went back to her job with a mixture of concern and resolve. Lauren was unaware of the call, was standing with her arms folded. Her authority is eroding, but her rage is smoldering. Naomi stayed sat and maintained her composed manner. Quite different from Lauren's anger, passengers kept their eyes on them, uncertain, flitting between Naomi and Lauren of what one of them might do next. Her voice barely audible as she leaned closer. "Naomi, are you okay?" she questioned above a whisper. Naomi looked to her with real concern. With a little comforting grin, "I'm okay," she replied quietly. The strain in the "it" was evident. That the cottage was quiet, only by the plan's fate engineered. It was evident that the circumstances were much. Naomi stayed sat from above. Despite the water, maintain a firm stance. She saw that it was seeping over her clothes. Lauren's tone was tough, yet calm, and, "You had to show me some consideration, but your prejudice caused you to fail, believing that I don't belong here simply because you are irritated with Lauren." She tightened her hold on the tray. Her tone changed as she drew in closer, making fun of, "Perhaps you should gain respect first. People like you are not worthy of my respect." The cabin's tension was. Passengers looked at each other visibly. Some people moving about in their chairs, uncertain of how to respond to the question that isn't asked. How far would this stay in the atmosphere? "Rose, you are now the target of Naomi's ire." Ought not to have said that. Naomi stated her statements were delivered in a forceful but cutting voice. An unsaid burden that leaves everyone in the cabin unsure of what might occur. Lauren then folded her arms in frustration. She sneered, "I'm still simmering, please. With you, I've been more than patient. Perhaps now you'll comprehend such behaviors have repercussions." Naomi's eyes squinted. Her calm demeanor remained somewhat unbroken. She murmured quietly, "You're right. Her statements and intentional acts do have repercussions, and you're going to discover. For a minute, let's see how accurate that is." Lauren made a mistake in Naomi's tone that made her shiver, but she immediately dismissed the emotion, saying, She is unfazed by your baseless threats," remarked, waving her hand dismissively. "It's you, not me, who regrets this." Lauren looked aside while projecting assurance. Yet uneasiness started to seep in from the inside. She had gone too far, and even if she refused to acknowledge that she was aware of the glances from the terrified passengers' expressions on Naomi's and Grace's faces, it all made Lauren feel calm and collected. She felt as if the walls were closing in. Attempted to ignore it, but her thoughts, what if this lady isn't who I thought she was? Believe she embodies Naomi's style, herself, the calmness with which she talked. It wasn't as authoritative as Lauren's sliver of assumptions for the first time. Her rage was pierced by doubt. Lauren's Yun Kn became more powerful as she repeated, the why didn't she shout at that point? In her mind, or resist, why did she warn I would regret it? Her stomach turned around as the she came to the understanding that she had let anger and prejudice take hold. And now she sensed that Lauren was going to have problems. Looked around the cabin in the hopes of discovering any assistance, but the travelers weren't longer on the businessman's side. Silently crossed his arms and scowled at her. Condemn the inquisitive socialite who whined. She shook her head at her friend. Grace looked disapprovingly as if she longed to vanish, her hands shaking. Naomi gripped the passenger list. Meanwhile, she stayed sat, her face crossing her legs. She was composed yet inscrutable. Gradually reclined in her chair with an unassuming assurance that made Lauren's deeper uneasiness. Naomi didn't have to. She didn't need to behave. She could raise her voice. Lauren's silence spoke it all. Didn't want to listen to the tense. The cabin became thicker as Lauren attempted to recover command of the circumstance, but no matter what she did or said, she was unable to dispel the notion that what she was doing would quickly recall what Naomi said. She thought, "You're creating a Lauren." Naomi was unaware of the error. She had sent a message already, and her silence. The slap reaction wasn't a submission. It was a tactic. Lauren was around, and danger was brewing. To determine the extent of the error. What do you suppose she made, Naomi? Need to do next? Inform us in the if you're enjoying this article, please comment. Click the subscribe button to get the cabin was tense due of the Lauren pacing in the vicinity Naomi's seat, her anger erupting over Naomi, who sat quietly and calm as if nothing had happened, impacting her in any way. However, Lauren secretly sensed the pressure of her behavior on her. Naomi grabbed for her without saying anything. Her actions on the phone were purposeful, and she immediately typed something before placing the gadget on the adjacent armrest. The gesture seemed straightforward to her, yet it had an unsaid force that made Lauren cast a suspicious gaze at the, "What do you think you're doing on your phone?" "Sharp, Naomi," Lauren inquired in a sharp voice. Didn't reply right away. Instead, she leaned back a little in her composed manner. "Never give up. You'll find out eventually." Softly, she said, her words conveying it caused Lauren's unease to deepen if you believe that Lauren's response was inappropriate to press that button. Additionally, remember to subscribe for more tales like as this one. The cabin plunged into intense quiet that is only shattered by fate. People who can hear the plane's engines humming looked at each other and whispered among the inquisitive. Socialite leaned on. Her voice was hardly audible when she spoke to her friend. "Whisper, what do you believe is happening?" "She is someone." Crucial. The businessman from the other side of the aisle sat still with a sly expression on his. He tapped his fingers on his face. Armrest, keeping his eyes on Naomi as if he had put something together. Minutes later, the sound was heard by no one else. The sound of footsteps came from in front of the cockpit. Door of the cabin opened, and when the pilot emerged, his face was white, and he looked around the room with a stiff frown. Momentarily before proceeding straight forward, Lauren's actions are swift, and Lauren went to him with purpose. She is clearly irritated by what is happening. Questioned her in a harsh tone, and the pilot halted. His stance in front of her makes you anxious. He replied in a voice, "You must move aside." Lauren is firm yet uncomfortable, frowned and saw that she was clearly confused. She crossed her arms and replied, "Pardon me, but why would I have to leave the situation I'm in charge of?" The pilot's eyes briefly shifted to Naomi. Then returning to Lauren, "I recently got a management's call, stating that the owner is on the aircraft and she's Miss Williams," remarked, gesturing to Naomi. His remarks clearly struck the audience like the cabin burst into a thunderclap. Noise, social light makes people gasp and whisper. Heard her breathing, her eyes enlarging as she shifted between looking at Naomi and, "I own the plane, Lauren," she muttered. Her tone was filled with incredulity at the merchant nodded, aware of his calm expression. I sensed he whispered to himself, as if the revelation validated his findings. Assumed Grace was standing close by all along. Relief cleaned the galley-frozen place over her face as she realized Naomi wasn't only a traveler. She was a person far more powerful than in the meanwhile. Had anybody seen Lauren? Gazed at the pilot, her expression changing to frightening hue of red that isn't. The fact that she stumbled and lost her voice. Typical sharpness must be present in some. The plane's error, detention was noticeable. The quiet that was only interrupted by as the engines hummed, people conversed uncomfortable looks at the slap's remembrance. Lauren stood, still vivid in their memories. Her arms were crossed close to the aisle. Defiance is apparent in spite of the increasing. Naomi continued to feel uneasy about her. She sat with poise and composure, as poised as ever, but suddenly over the intercom, the captain's voice could be heard. "Gentlemen and ladies, we'll be producing an unforeseen landing. Please stay. Take a seat and get ready for passengers on the descent," muttered in perplexity. The guy leaned in Naomi's direction. "What's going on and why are we whispering?" Naomi didn't respond when she landed. Expression calm, but Lauren's brow wrinkled, unreadable. Her confidence wavered as she looked anxiously in the direction of the cabin's front. The aircraft landed without incident, and shortly after that, a slick black SUV drew up. The doors go straight up to the tarmac. Door and two well-dressed assistants emerged. Their quick movements, and they climbed the few stairs with intent. Their presence with subdued authority demanding attention as soon as the cabin was entered by Miss Williams. One of they spoke in a kind tone. "Respectfully, everything is prepared for you." Immediately the cabin echoed with gasps. Lauren's face became pale as she froze. As the insight struck her like a wave, Miss Williams's voice trailed off. The helpers were scarcely audible above a whisper. Disregarded her, concentrating only on, "Do you need anything, Naomi, before we go forward?" One of them inquired about their tone. Naomi stood slowly and deferentially, elegant and thoughtful motions. She calmly adjusted her blazer. The passengers saw the power radiating in shocked quiet as Naomi eventually spoke in a firm, authoritative tone. "My name is Naomi Williams," she said, looking. "I'm the one sweeping over the cabin. This plane's owner, and I'm also the Lauren's mouth." The airline's owner closed and opened, yet no words were released. The assured, condescending flight. Now, the attendant was a faint shadow of. She replaced her previous Beto with pure panic. Naomi's gaze shifted. Her tone was quiet, yet as piercing as a blade. "Lauren, your actions today have been absolutely dishonorable," she said, her voice piercing the quiet. "You have degraded yourself by mistreating a traveler and damaged the reputation of this airline." Lauren stumbled as she said, shaky voice, "I didn't know." Naomi raised a hand to silence her. "But you didn't know because you didn't take the time to treat me with the attention that each traveler deserves merits," she said firmly, "rather than you assumed that you would behave in a discrimination, and you made things worse. It might have been resolved using simple." The passengers nodded in civility. Accord, their previous quiet providing technique to support their face with whispers luminous with With appreciation, Mr. Raymond folded his newspaper, neatly handing Naomi and, with a nod of approval, Naomi eventually stood her deliberate and regulated motions. She put her blazer straight and glanced straight at Lauren, her eyes serene yet demanding that there be no errors in your Lauren's behavior. She said in a hushed tone, yet it had a power that quieted the Lauren's gaze swept over the whole cabin, the room looking for a support system her up, but nobody approached her. The passengers quietly observed the defense, others with their phones subtly up, keeping track of every step Naomi took. Her voice remained firm as she approached Lauren. She started you while you were busy criticizing me, failed to fulfill your obligation, which is to show respect to each and every passenger, regardless of who they are or your presumptions concerning them. And nowadays there are repercussions. Lauren's hands tightened. Her thoughts were racing, and she wanted to protect herself by arguing, but the words refused to come. She could sense the burden of all eyes on her, as well as for her confidence wavered for the first time. Naomi motioned fully to the pilot. I want this resolved right now, she said. I want to make sure that this doesn't happen. The pilot nodded. If it happened to anybody again, his professional manner was understood. Lauren took a step, he remarked to Miss Williams. Back her thoughts, which was racing with anxiety. She followed her intuition and headed for the exit, yelling for her to go before anything worsened, but prior to her making a move, the pilot blocked her way. Forceful expression, you're not going. To whenever he spoke, Naomi's eyes didn't waver. Lauren, what you did today has shown that you're not qualified for this job. Effective right now, you are shot. And the words lingered in the atmosphere like a Lauren's face collapsed at the final decision, and she stepped back, losing confidence. Utterly broken, please, Miss Williams, she said in a whisper. I didn't intend to shatter Naomi's. You didn't intend to stiffen your expression, she replied icily. Get caught. But you did, and you'll now confront the repercussions. During that time, 2 uniformed policemen got on the aircraft, their presence generating a flurry of whispers among Lauren. One of the passengers turned as they got closer to Miss Williams' Ashen. With respect, one of the cops said, got your report, are you in a hurry? Charges. Naomi's eyes remained fixed on you. This person, she said firmly, attacked me in front of many witnesses. I anticipate having her detained responsible. Lauren took a stride and gasped. Back, wait, there's a miscommunication. Her voice was urgent as she sobbed, but I didn't intend. One of the officers moved forward to displaying 2 handcuffs. Ma'am, you have been arrested for assault. According to the officer, whatever you say may and be used against you in a court of. Lauren's respiration accelerated as she recognized that there was no escape from her stare. Flicked to Omi, who remained composed and created a sharp contrast with her presence. To Lauren's deteriorating behavior, issues had come, and Lauren was aware that she couldn't avoid it. This was only the start of her passengers watching in disbelief. Lauren's hands, being tied in silent tears, poured down her cheeks. Face as she attempted to object, pleading with Miss I apologize, Williams, for crying at Naomi's. Your expression stayed neutral. An apology is meaningless without accountability, she said softly. You made your decisions. You'll now confront the repercussions that the passengers observed. Their eyes were discreetly focused on Lauren as she vanished down the aisle. The once prominent flight attendant was now a defeated person because of her conceit. Replaced with remorse and embarrassment, Naomi returned to the cabin. Her tone remained steady as she spoke the travelers. To all of you here, I'm sorry you had to see it. These days, this is not the norm of service I anticipate when I go by. Airline going ahead. We'll make sure that each the passenger is given dignified treatment, and the deference they deserve. In the cabin broke out in applause and applauding. Mr. Raymond eagerly presented a brief smile. As Mrs. Raymond placed her, putting down the knitting, to clap, Naomi turned courteously to grace the younger flight attendant who had discreetly helped her throughout the grace. Naomi described the experience in her tone. I saw your professionalism and softness. I appreciate you taking charge today. If it matters, you will hear from me office about a promotion. Grace is considering. Her expression expanded and she nodded rapidly. Dazzling with thank you, Miss Williams, Naomi remarked gently. grinning momentarily before moving in the direction of the exit, her helper trailing closely behind. The mood of the plan had changed, entirely replaced the previous tension with relief and adoration. Justice had been attended to, and Naomi had shown nobody on the airplane would ever forget it. Do you believe Lauren is deserving of pardon? Or should she endure the repercussions of her actions? Express your ideas. In the passengers grinned at the remarks below the engagement and the moment's warmth permeating the cabin. The nosy lady, who saw the whole thing, leaning with wide-eyed fascination sitting forward. "Miss Williams, you're fantastic," she said in awe. Radiantly radiant, Naomi turned to face her. "Thank you," with a soft grin on her lips. "Remember this moment," she said. "It's always worthwhile to defend what's—" As soon as Naomi got off the aircraft, the tarmac's clean air welcomed her. The black UV eagerly awaited its driver, keeping the door open while her helpers strolled next to her, giving her an update on her next meeting. But Naomi's opinions pondered the day's events afterward. Naomi sat in a televised interview. Her manner at Sleek Studio was as composed as the interviewer leaned forward at all times. "Obviously, Miss Williams, your story has me enthralled. Gone viral with millions of viewers. How did you respond to this circumstance? What message did you convey to get Naomi's attention?" Steady as she gave a clear response. "Furthermore, unwavering respect is a right, not a—" She claimed that everyone should have access to privilege. Respect, regardless of their appearance, where they originate from, or what others believe what real leadership is all about. Establishing the benchmark and making sure it's maintained. The interviewer's obvious nod. "What would you say to those who are moved, who had comparable difficulties but don't own the same platform that you?" I would say that Naomi's expression softened. Such internal strength even. When you feel inconspicuous, consider you don't need riches or a title to be valuable. All you have to do is stand up and demand respect. Strong in your identity. A few weeks later, this time, Naomi got on a plane. When a new team arrived, the enthusiasm was kind, accommodating, and competent. She was welcomed by the lead flight attendant with the sincere grin. "Welcomes you on board, miss. It is a privilege to have you." Naomi Williams smiled back at her as she sat into. The atmosphere felt lighter in her seat. Flawless service, but more significantly, it was packed with. She looked out the window with respect, observing the runway disappear into the sky. A feeling of tranquility enveloped her. The day's events had left a lasting influence not only on the travelers, also crew that had observed, but on each. Everyone who saw the story's development, Naomi, was aware that what she had done had turned an unfairness into a lesson that would extend much beyond that one flight. She grinned, understanding that sometimes the most significant triumphs weren't about triumphing, they were about motivating. Shift as the travelers became more comfortable with Naomi silently reached for their chairs. Her phone after the events that had unfolded. She realized that this was more than it included altering a system that permitted bias and presumptions to flourish as the aircraft rose farther into. As the clouds moved, Naomi took a seat. The window, in the front of the aircraft next to her, framed a stunning vista of the landscape below the horizon fades into. She looked out at a sea of white and blue. The boundless sky, a feeling of tranquility sweeping over. This wasn't just about her. Addressing the PRUDIS or making her authority was about making a change, turning shame into a potent teaching. One that would have far-reaching effects alone. Naomi grinned to herself as she flew. There is a little reflection in the glass. She was aware that this was just the start. Every choice, every regulation, every leadership action she was forming a day in the future where compassion and respect were the norm rather than the exception. The peal as it rose, the engines hummed softly. As it approached its destination, with Naomi at the steering wheel of her vision, a silent victory that there could never be any turbulence in a public declaration issued soon after Naomi, the flight attendant, addressed the her statement sent. A message to the globe that struck a chord much beyond the boundaries of the jet. Luxury is more than just looks, said in a moving video that swiftly went viral. It concerns the experience we design for everybody's actual success is determined not by how you handle it, but also what you can afford others, which is the reason I'm putting fresh regulations across my airline to guarantee that each traveler, regardless of who they feel appreciated and honored, the comment that prompted discussions on social media, with those praising Naomi's leadership and her dedication to altering hashtags, like as above all, show respect and hash Naomi's for days. The vision trended, encouraging others to consider their own actions and biases. If you like the narrative, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with others in your immediate vicinity.